This book can be your constant companion. Just pick up any single poem, any single section or chapter of this book, read it through, and then meditate on those contents. And if you want to understand unlearning better, check out this book. Now, that is validation enough, right? The host of the Unlearning Playground is asking you to read this book to understand unlearning better.
It is a sacred practice by which we can come to the greatest gifts of healing and belonging, the medicine of understanding.
Hello, good people of the internet. Welcome to another episode in the Unlearning Playground Book Club by Chetan Naran. The book that we're reviewing in today's episode is one that is very close to my heart. It is Stepping Through, a poetic work by none other than Rocco Jarman. Yes, my good friend Rocco Jarman from Eyes Wide Open Life. If you are a regular subscriber of the Unlearning Playground, you would have heard me talking about his work on a lot of my episodes or on my different videos. He is a fellow collaborator. We have been thinking about collaborating in various different projects over the years, so we will come up with a lot more things. Today's video is dedicated to his second book, Stepping Through. I was privileged enough to receive one of the first copies, I think a couple of weeks back or so, and I read it cover to cover in I think just a few days. And I loved every single poem that is written here. And I'm someone personally who does not really read too much poetry. I don't know. I just do not. And if you're like me, if you think that poetry can be a little obscure at times, can be a little open to interpretation at times, that is the beauty of it. But what Rocco has done with this book is that he's been very pragmatic. So with every single poem, although they are very short poems, with every single one of them, you would have some context either before the poem or after the poem to let you know that this is the message he's trying to convey, or at least this is the context in which he's trying you to derive a message from this poem. I think he's done a brilliant job with this book. And what's more, it's just some 150 odd pages. You can read it cover to cover if you wish to, of course, but you can also just pick out any single random single poem, just read it and meditate on it. And in fact, if you're someone who meditates regularly, which is something I would highly recommend, if you do that, this book can be your constant companion. Just pick up any single poem, any single section or chapter of this book, read it through, and then meditate on those contents. I think if you do that as a regular practice, you would see your level of understanding of life, of yourself, of other people around you improve manifold. And if that doesn't lead to improved relationships, if that doesn't lead to an improved life, I do not know what does. So, the way I wanted to structure today's video would be like all my other book reviews. I would highly recommend reading this book cover to cover yourself. But for the sake of today's video, what I'll do is I'll talk about a few life lessons that I would want you to derive from this book. In no means, by no means can I do justice to what this book will do for you. So you must read this book yourself. But if you do not have the time, at least right now, make sure that you watch this video till the end. Make sure that you go through every single life lesson that I talk about from this book. And then, if I move you enough, definitely read this book. And what's more, today's video has a special section featuring the man himself, Rocco Jarman. Where else would you find a word from the author in the book review video itself, right? Other than the Unlearning Playground. So, without further ado, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe the channel, and let's get into it. The first life lesson I would offer from this book is one from his poem In Pursuit of Meaning, where he talks about, in no uncertain terms, that each of us has a certain something to offer to the world. And when we click with it, we shine. It's like we are literally, not literally, we are emitting light. And in the poetic terms that he's so used to, he says, anything that does not light you up is too small to invest all your energy and attention into. How pragmatic, right? How timely for today's hustle culture where everyone is after the same small stuff. And what he's trying to tell you is not to quit your job and move into whatever your passion is. He's simply trying to tell you that if you're doing something that does not light you up, that does not make you feel as if, yes, this is something that I'm here for, this is something that I was born for, at least do not invest all your energy and all your attention into it. Make sure you keep looking for something else, for that something that lights you up. And to add to that, he says, Any time spent wondering what this might be, asking the impossible question, even if the answer eludes you, is not time wasted. So even if you are someone who cannot say that you have something that lights you up, keep looking. It's just around the corner. Life lesson number two that I would talk about from this book is none other than letting go or unlearning. A common theme that appears throughout Rocco's work, and especially in this book, is this concept of threshing, which is basically separating, what do they call it, the wheat from the chaff? Or it's like if you want to become a higher self, if you want to become a better version of yourself, you have to let go of that lower self. And that involves threshing, that involves letting go, that involves unlearning your attachment to that lower self. And the poet that he is, he puts it in very beautiful terms, telling you that we often mistake that this will be a very comfortable process. This will be something that we love, while it is anything but, because it's not dust that is being separated from us, like we are taking a good bath or something. It's almost as if it's a limb getting cut off. The valid metaphor for it, as he puts it, is almost the separating of a velcro or the removing of a band-aid. It hurts, but it needs to be done. And I think it's uncomfortable, but I mean, I will not be selling unlearning here in this video. You know that if you are a regular listener of this platform, I talk about unlearning all the time. And if you want to understand unlearning better, check out this book. Now, that is validation enough, right? The host of the Unlearning Playground is asking you to read this book to understand unlearning better. And I'll end this with one more quote from him. He says, "Pity the comfortable, for they're doomed to remain as they are." Life lesson number three from this book is around self love. Self love, I think personally, this is a word that has been so abused lately. People consider self love to be um, to be able to eat that next dessert that you so want to be able to take that next trip that you so want to. And while all of that is necessary at times, that is not what real self love would be, right? I think it's very obvious to me, at least, that self love should mean something higher than giving in to what you want in this given moment. Now, Rocco talks about self love in the most real terms that they could be. And he says, I think he says that real self love is sitting with your feelings in the moment and letting yourself be vulnerable enough to consider everything that is going on inside you in the moment. Not really taking action out of every single feeling that appears in your consciousness, but sitting with them honestly, even with feelings that you're ashamed of. Now, that is self love. I think just for this section, he has dedicated at least a few poems in this book. And I personally know a lot of people who have very wrong ideas about self love. And I think I should be gifting them this book so that just so that they understand what real self love looks like. And I think you should do that too. I'm sure you would be connected to a lot of people on Instagram and YouTube who keep talking about self love, about self love in a manner which is almost childish at times. And if you want them to grow up, gift them this book. Now, life lesson number four from this book is easily one of my favorite sections of this book, which is centered around the topic of forgiveness. Rocco talks beautifully about forgiveness, firstly, about forgiving yourself. There are so many situations in our lives where, when we think about those situations in hindsight, we understand that we were too small or too ignorant in those situations, and now we know we can act better. But we do not forgive ourselves for being small or ignorant at that time. Rather, we keep waiting for us to become worthy enough, or worse yet, we wait for others to make us feel worthy enough so that we can forgive ourselves. And to that end, Rocco says something like, we have to forgive ourselves and spend the rest of our life living up to our potential. We do it, and then we show others how to lead themselves by example. Not merely by saying, but by leading them by example. The ones learning from our example are our children. We work hard on our wounds and the generational trauma we inherited so they won't have to. How beautiful, right? And then he talks about forgiving others too. Forgiving others not in just a manner of forgetting about whatever happened, but in a manner of processing all of the grief that surrounds everything that transpired in the past, applying this medicine of understanding on it, and then letting go, being truly free. And he talks about various different scenarios that this can lead to. It could be having a deep conversation with another person, could be having a deep conversation with yourself about that person if that person isn't ready. But definitely that involves processing the entire situation. And I think this is one of my favorite sections of this book because this is as pragmatic as can be. This is real life therapy, I tell you. So read this book, understand what he's talking about when he talks about forgiveness, and just derive the best out of those lessons. To that end, I'll also want to read one more piece from this book. He says, if I cannot love and forgive others for the wounds they gave me, I have missed the lesson of the wound. If I cannot love and forgive myself for the wounds I gave others, I have missed the lessons of love and forgiveness. How beautiful, Rocco. Thank you for this. Before we go any further, I would like to remind you to like this video, subscribe to the channel so that you have good content coming your way every now and then. Let's keep going. Now, the fifth life lesson that I would talk about from this book is one that I call the paradox of certainty. What that means is, a lot of times we tend to enforce upon the world around us, upon people around us, a certain kind of certainty that doesn't really exist. um, by that, what I mean is, because of our prior life experiences, we tend to think that everything is the way we think it is, which leads to, let's say, general statements like, this is how Muslims are, this is how all Hindus are, this is how all Pakistanis are, this is how all Indians are, etc., etc. This is how all celebrities behave, and so on. Now, you may think that this is all superficial stuff and it doesn't really matter as such. And I agree with you to some extent. But what happens is, this is something really interesting. You should understand this. There is a very old Zen koan which goes something like this: not knowing is most intimate. This is something that Rocco talks about in his book too. Now, what this means is, see, at the core of our being, what all of us want is to be one with life, to feel that we are one with life, to feel that we belong here, that life got us, that we got this, etc., etc. All of those kinds of feelings. And that is not possible unless we encounter life the way it is. And because of these certainties that I'm talking about, which are in other words our biases, they kind of block us from seeing the world the way it is, and therefore we can never really be absolutely intimate with life. And that is what the koan is: not knowing is most intimate. And therein lies the paradox of certainty too. Now, while these certainties, these biases help us navigate through life, they also block us from seeing life the way it is. And therefore, becoming aware of this, understanding this at a deeper level, definitely helps you to lead a more fulfilling, a more purposeful, a more meaningful life. And that's not just the poet in me talking. So I think for this section itself, you can read this book and it will definitely do a good job of helping you navigate this vocabulary a bit better. Check it out. The next life lesson I would want you to derive from this book is one of my favorite quotes from Rocco, where he says, willingness is not readiness. Here's what it means. There are so many situations in our lives where we're trying to, let's say, punch above our weight. We're trying to do something that is outside of our comfort zone. And we face certain kinds of challenges for which we may be willing, but we're not ready. So you may be willing to do something out of the ordinary, but you may not be ready to face the challenges that it brings. And therefore, Rocco is trying to differentiate between the two. Willingness is not readiness. To do something that is outside of your comfort zone, you have to, of course, be willing to do it, but you also have to be ready to do it, which means more than anything else, you have to be ready to be detached from your familiar ways of doing things. You have to be ready to unlearn those sticky parts of your identity that keeps you trapped, keeps you small, so that that velcro of discomfort keeps hitting you harder and harder. And therefore, if you are willing to do something, Rocco is trying to guide you that you also have to be ready to face the kind of challenges that that willing brings. No growth happens within your comfort zone. Every single growth brings a lot of discomfort, and you have to be willing to go through that discomfort and also be ready to go through that discomfort. How beautifully put, right? The seventh and final life lesson I would talk about today from this book is the fact that life goes on in cycles. Life goes on in the form of those ups and downs, those crests and troughs, those sine waves for everyone. And there is a season for being different kinds of people almost. So, in his poetic way, Rocco says that there is a season for being a wolf and there's a season for being a squirrel. How beautifully put, isn't it? There are some times of the day or some times of the month or the year, for that matter, for some people, where they're almost wolves. They can take care of everything, they can control everything, and they can be strong and stoic in every aspect of the term. And then there are some phases of our lives where we are almost squirrels. We are weak, we are meek, we are almost hibernating to just simply go through that phase. And he tries to make you understand that you need to learn the grace to accept that this is life. This happens with everyone. These ups and downs, these crests and troughs, these seasons occur for every single one of us. And the sooner we learn the grace to handle these lower phases of our lives and also the grace to handle the upward phases of our lives, we'll be golden. The sooner we learn this, we'll all be golden. And now I want to pass on the stage to the writer himself, Rocco Jarman, who has a message for the Unlearning Playground. But before I do that, I want to ask you, are you ready? And especially ladies, are you ready? I'm just kidding. Let's get into it.
Life is a necessary threshing. It takes much from us and leaves us so often feeling lost and alone, as if we've been overlooked by whatever grace and providence we seek to be held by in our low moments. In the seasonality of our lives, the perennial invitation is to yield to the threshing and the necessary disappearance, and brace ourselves for those moments of sacred stepping through, where we can leave all that is small behind us and take our full inheritance, the essence of our experiences and trials, through the door with us in our sacred pilgrimages to be whole and to be home. Poetry for me has been that medicine, as much a practice as it is a craft, an investigative and exposing journalism of the soul, by which we can express the unexpressible. It is the way which makes of our wounds and our dearest cares all the map and stars we shall ever need to chart our course, and the shape love makes when we hold it true to it in our hearts, the only compass. I'm reading from the last chapter of my book called Stepping Through, which is called A Parting Gift. And the point of this is that this work for me is a form of prayer, secular prayer. I'm a non-religious person, but I find more and more, especially in the troubling times that we're all facing, that I'm becoming more spiritual in some manner. And, as my dear friend Chetan would say, none of that needs to be woo-woo, obscure, flowery stuff. It's a very real part of the human experience. And so this work is a form of prayer. It's a heartfelt wish that this book may become a regular companion and physician to you, as many of the pieces are to me. And poetry for me has never been simply a hobby or a vocation, poetry or writing. It is a sacred practice by which we can come to the greatest gifts of healing and belonging, the medicine of understanding. My name is Rocco Jarman. I'm a poet, a writer, and a philosopher living in Western Australia. I'm a close and dear friend of Chetan, and we're a collaborator on philosophical projects, all aimed to bring medicine of understanding into the world and to leave the place maybe one day a little bit brighter than it could have been without our efforts. And I hope this message finds you well. Good day.
Thank you so much for that message, Rocco. And thank you for staying till the end of this video. I hope this gave you something to think about, something to unlearn about. I hope I was able to move you enough to read this book. If so, check it out from the link down below in the description. As always, it is an Amazon affiliate link, which means if you buy via that link, it helps to support the Unlearning Playground. I hope I was able to move you enough to do that. You can check out all the other content on the Unlearning Playground. If you have not subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share this with your friends and family. Make sure they spend quality time on the internet. And I'll see you in the playground the next time. Until next time, peace out.